Hope and faith. Hope and faith. I don't know if my take on this really ancient Greek story is right or not, but it works for me. I know that when I was working with my own teacher and when we spoke about hope, he disagreed with me and in fact changed the story a little bit. And I kept telling him, Hussein, that's the wrong version. That's not the way the story is told in the Greek tradition. He said, Amir, I read it in Persian. I said, well, they translated it the wrong way. This is what the Greeks say, but all that aside. And you've heard the story plenty of times, so my apologies. So there are two brothers. One's name is Epimetheus and the other is Prometheus. Prometheus was the guy who stole fire or light or wisdom, and he decided to bring that down to us, human beings, because we lived supposedly in darkness, and Prometheus took pity on us and wanted to enlighten us. When Zeus found out what he had done, he was very angry because Zeus knew that human beings are corrupt. Whatever they touch, they will destroy. They'll take wisdom and they'll turn it into something organized. Something that was alive now becomes something that's dead, lifeless. And so Zeus believed that wisdom should remain with the gods because human beings don't have the capacity for it. But nevertheless, Prometheus thought otherwise. Epimetheus and Prometheus were very close siblings. When Zeus had created human beings or created things, the two brothers went to Zeus and said to him, give us your bag of tricks and we'll give all the created things out there some attribute, some clothing, if you will. So they gave the giraffe like a long neck. They gave a cheetah speed. They gave the lion his mane and all that stuff. And finally they reached a human being and they were standing naked and they looked in their bag to clothe the human being with something, but they couldn't find anything because the bag had become empty. They had given all, that were in the bags to the various other creatures. So they go to Zeus, relatively embarrassed, saying, we don't have anything to give to human beings. So Zeus himself comes down, looks at human beings and says to them, I'm going to give you two things. And they're going to be hidden inside you, but once in a while they will come up. One is called shame, the other is called justice. And it's a funny thing, shame. When you have kids, at least for those of us who have in this class, something really interesting happens. Their language is very clean up to the age like 3, depending on the parents and what they watch and the sort of music they listen to. So one day, for example, your 5-year-old comes home and says, Dad? So, yeah? What's fuck? What? Who told you that? And they say it so casually, so boldly. And you sit back and you say, don't they have any shame? But the truth is, they have not yet been contaminated. They haven't yet been civilized. They're very organic, very natural. And so Everything for them is a thing of curiosity. And time passes, they become socialized a little bit. And by socialized, the ridiculous adult world, some of it is very, very good. And the next time they want to use that particular word, they whisper it. And they whisper it in ears that they trust. And just in case they're overheard by some stranger, they look around and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And they're filled with some shame. Not embarrassment, but shame perhaps. Justice, and these have, external and internal versions. Justice is an interesting thing. It's about righting a wrong, It's like, there was a guy, he's a cook now. He had done drugs and a good amount of alcohol for about 40 years of his life. Abi, hello. How are you? Good, thank you. And he had a stroke. And he came to realize that without his body, he'll amount to nothing. And so he wanted to give justice back to his body, give it health. And he became a vegan. And he started exercising and all sorts of things. And now at the age of 60 or 70, he had like a 6-pack or a 12-pack. He looked really, really good. Assalamu alaikum. You're a 49ers fan? You like football?
No. Just t-shirt. From Rose.
Yeah.
$20.
$20? That's not bad.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah?
It's original.
I remember I had a football player in my class. His name was C.J. Anderson. He got picked up by Broncos. And so after a few years, he comes back to visit. And he gives me, I don't know if it was his underwear or something. And I take a picture, I was standing right in this classroom. And I send the picture to my nephew, who was at the time like 6, the other one was like 5. And so they take the photo and show it to their friends. And here I'm holding the underwear. And so my nephew asked if I could, give him the underwear. I said, sure. It belongs to C.J. Anderson. It hadn't been washed, so everything was original. The smell. And so he puts it on eBay and sells it for $35. Yeah. So let me continue with the story. So let me just skip all of that and just get to the hope part. So Epimetheus is about to get married. And he's about to get married to a very, very attractive, but a naughty little woman, Pandora. And she was infected with this thing called curiosity. It's like a kid. Does all sorts of crazy things because they're just driven by curiosity. They have no shame about it. And that's the justice that they have. That curiosity eventually needs to be satisfied, and they have no shame, and rightly so. And so Zeus gives Pandora this box and writes on it, "Don't open," knowing full well that it's kind of like the Garden of Eden story. There are all these trees out there, but let me just make one tree over there and tell them, by the way, don't go over there. It's like telling your kid, like a 2-year-old, the entire house is yours, but can you not go near the fridge because there is ice cream in there? Well, if you had never told the kid, he would have probably never gone, play with his toy box. But no, you tempt them, and then they pursue the temptation, then they touch it, and then you punish them. Okay. And so the ceremony is over. Pandora goes to the room to figure out who has given her what, and comes upon this very, very beautiful box. It's mysterious a little. And the temptation even increases because on the box it says, "Don't open." And she does. She follows her nature, and the box opens. all the evil that exists today comes out. There is one element that's about to come up, but the lid is shut, closed. And the thing that remains in the box is hope. Hope never comes out. And I don't know how, the story is interpreted by different people. The way I see it is, hope really is an illusion. It's something that ultimately victimizes you, harasses you. You get into a relationship and it's hope that drives you. You've been drinking or smoking for 20 years, you read a book. You hope that it'll heal you. Or you hope that the drink or the smoking will remove the pain from you. Or you haven't a degree, you go to school, you struggle, you suffer for the next few years, and you get a degree hoping that it will bring back value and meaning. And I suppose what Zeus wants to tell Pandora is, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter where you go, there are certain realities in life that you can't escape. Violence will always be there. Harassments will always be there. Ignorance will always be there. Mistakes will always be there. And don't ever hope, since many of us in this class are young, that you may walk outside and you may see a riot, people shouting for justice and fairness and all that, and you may want to join. And it may give you a good feeling for a minute or two, but don't be too hopeful. Human nature is far too poisonous, far too toxic, far too corrupt. All the evils that had disappeared in that riot, fighting for justice for an hour or two, will go away and human nature will kick in. And one of the things that I take from the story is it's much better to live with the realities of life. But to be in the presence of certain realities of life, you must have gone through life with a great amount of hope. You go in relationships with hope. You do things in hope. Almost everything that you do. And then little by little, life touches you. And not in a good way. You slowly begin to see love disappear from your life. You begin to see curiosity disappear. You begin to have less joy when you go to work, when you talk to your friends, when you look yourself in the mirror. It seems as if space and time have a tendency of just removing all that's good from life. And then you're faced with the reality. And you realize that your life really stinks. And I'm not sure who wrote this particular story, but it can be someone who has a very positive outlook about life. Because if they had a positive outlook about life, they would allow hope to come up, and devour all these evil things and transform negativity into positivity, darkness into light. But that's not the case. And to some extent, I think, most of the sages or philosophers or prophets that humanity has created have come up with that specific message that you can't really hope too much in life. Don't trust people. Look at Moses. He just kills them. Even God has a hell because he knows that some people are just not redeemable, But even God is not sure completely, so we have purgatory. Let's see if their soul can be purged. Some of the poison can be deleted. And I suppose the question would be then, if you want to walk into life with no hope, how are you going to deal with the realities of life? Consider for a moment. So we come to class. Let's just say we have a good time. And let's say the class excites and inspires you. The class ends at 10:45. You have another 12 hours waiting for you. 12 hours of distraction. And every time you get distracted, the ideas of this class goes away. They have no practical application. And even if you were to apply the ideas of this class to your life wouldn't work. And you can't serve two masters. Okay. Add to it the fact that you have a past. It's something that Andrew spoke about yesterday in class. How do you override a belief system? Well, what is really a belief system but the experience you accumulate over the last 20 years of your life? What, do you think an hour of this flimsy class has the power to remove 20 years of experience? You know, if you've been an alcoholic or an addict of sorts, it doesn't matter to what. For 20 years, do you think reading the Bible and being inspired by a verse or a chapter is going to override your addiction? Of course not. Now, if that's the reality we're working with, that this class will not even make a dent, because your past is a living organism. It'll do whatever it can to protect itself. It wants to continue to survive. It's not a dead thing. It governs. Louis, your hair looks good. No, keep it that way. No, it's really nice. I wish I had hair like yours, but you know how things go. So, I'm not really quite sure which version is better, to be hopeful or to be hopeless. And, you know, it doesn't mean that you don't want to continue living, but you have to carry this cross, you know. And it's a difficult thing, and that's one of the symbols of, you know, the cross and Jesus, or Atlas, who carries the world on his shoulders and his knees are broken, his back is bent. That the reality of life really is like you have to carry your cross, and it is burdensome, you know. I'm not quite sure if that's the best path to take. I mean, you guys are young. You're very, very young. And you need to look forward. You need to, you need to be hopeful about your future. The relationships you get into, the classes you take, you know, the jobs that you will have, the money you will make, the houses that you will buy and hopefully turn into homes, the marriages, the children, and hopefully having children who are relatively decent and healthy. And the only way you can kind of be hopeful about those things is just be blind to everything that's around you. Kind of like Pandora, you know. The difference with, I think, us and Pandora is Pandora sees the evils. And she has the courage to keep hope within. Just leave it in the box. I don't want to be deceived. You know, just because I send my kids to this good school, it doesn't mean they're going to turn out good. There's a good chance they'll turn out to be quite rotten. I have no power over the forces of the society or culture, social media. I have zero power over them. And they spend about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours of their day in school with vultures. So, if I don't have hope, then, and if I look at hope in the wrong way or look at realities of life in the wrong way, the truth is life will be in a very despairing way. I don't know how I'm going to survive it. So that's the thing about hope. You have to be blind to be hopeful. You can't see realities and be hopeful. And it's something that most of us in this class have experienced. If you have been in a relationship and your companion has been a little rotten, but you love them or her for some ridiculous reason, and you forgive him once or her, then twice and thrice and thrice, and after a while you say, I'm just really exhausted, you know. And then after a while, something really strange happens. You begin to lose hope that you're going to make this relationship work. It's just not possible. And at a certain point, you break. You pack up your stuff and you leave. And it's facing the reality that allows you to taste freedom a little bit. Illusions are gone, hope is gone, and now you get to see things for what they are. And it's a frightening place to be. Because even though physically you walk away from the relationship, you can't erase the memories. They're very, very difficult. You have a narrative with this person, a history you've created for about 10, 15, 20 years. You can't just get rid of it overnight. You know, there was a movie with Demi Moore and what's that good-looking guy's name? Rob Lowe, about last night. When the movie came out in the 80s, I must have seen the movie about 50, 60 times. I would travel from Davis to Sacramento because Davis had stopped showing the movie. And I would just figure out what theaters, near us would show. And myself and Paul Nikaido, with whom I used to play tennis about 7, 8 hours a day, would go and watch the movie. I rambled on so much about the movie, I forgot what I was talking about. Anyway, so there you have it. Faith. There are so many different versions of, it's a very, very powerful concept. You know, when you're young and you make mistakes, but you assume that what you're doing is right, and then you have to pay the consequences for the mistakes that you make. Let me give you an example. If some of you in this class had done things the right way, and I know it's a relative term, the way usually these things work, at least in the culture from which I come, you graduate from high school around the age 18, you go to college for about 2 years, that's 20. You go to a 4-year school and you're done with your bachelor's when you're 22. If you decide to continue, you have your master's by the time you're 24, and you have your PhD by the time you're about 30 or so. Okay. So you don't do any of that, and time passes. And one day you wake up, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, damn, life gave me so many opportunities, all squandered. And then you suffer because of it, and then maybe you get sad or depressed or angry, and then you put yourself to school, and you're like 35 now, okay? So whatever the age may be, doesn't matter. And then you realize something really interesting. You actually, at this stage in your life, you have the capacity to hear and listen and learn and change and understand. And all of a sudden, all the mistakes you had made in your life, something sprouts inside you that if it wasn't for all the mistakes I had made, I wouldn't be here now. And all of a sudden, there is this dim hint of trust and faith that blossoms inside you. That maybe mistakes are made for a reason. Maybe I am here for a reason. Okay? And all of a sudden, faith has this, it's like alchemy, this component that removes the wrinkles that have bothered you so many times and so often from your past. And you look yourself within the context of all the mistakes that you've made, and you say, you know what? I have faith that things will be okay. Faith is also about trust. You trust something. Whether you're a transcendentalist like Emerson and Thoreau, where you say, you know what? Nature has a way with things. I am part of nature, as Nietzsche would say, the German philosopher. Since I am part of nature, and nature is organic, and I am part of life, and life is organic, life is going somewhere, I'm going with life, and things happen, and nature has a tendency of correcting itself. My life will eventually be corrected. So there is this thing that you tap into the past, and somehow you tap into the future, and they're both governed by faith and trust. And, it's one of those things where you're married, you trust your judgment, things don't work out, you no longer have faith in your judgment, time passes, you find a companion, you have hope, you have trust, you have faith. you know. And then arguments take place, then you lose your trust, and you lose your faith, you begin to self-doubt, then all of a sudden you have the ability to communicate, then trust, faith, everything comes back. And that's how we function. You know, in many ways, we are in the land of purgatory. That you wake up this morning, you have hope. You take a nap, you wake up from the afternoon nap, and you're in despair. In despair, you have zero faith. In hope, you have a good amount of faith. And that's how things work. You know, and it's difficult to kind of figure out how you can find stability because we are emotional nomads. I'm not like the Buddha who can come up with a single focused philosophy of life, that life is suffering, period. There is nothing permanent in life. I am walking, but I may fall apart. I have a marriage, but it may fall apart. I have kids, they may die. You know. And so you walk in life without trusting anything, depending on anything that life offers you, knowing that at any time, everything could be taken away from you. I'm just a regular guy. You know, I read a couple of books, got some Photoshop degrees, you know, and I have no idea how hope comes, and I have no idea how it disappears, and I have no idea how faith comes and how it disappears. All I know is that the world has a great amount of power over me. It makes me, it breaks me. There is something about faith, though. It's magical. You trust something you can't see, you can't smell, you can't touch. It's beyond your five senses, and it's beautiful. And when you have faith, to some extent, it makes you magical. You know, I just don't know the healthiness of faith and hope long term, especially if your temperament is one of realism. If you're an optimist, if that's the way you've been wired, you're going to see everything, you know, on the positive side. So, can I tell you a story? I don't recommend or encourage any of you to kind of take the story seriously, but the stories go, they're really, really good story. It's a good story, and it comes from the 8th century, and it comes from the Middle East, and it specifically comes from Iran, from the Sufi tradition, you know. So you have Islam, it becomes organized, and out of this organized tradition, you have this branch that sprouts out and talks about the spiritual aspect of the tradition. You know, it's like, it's something that men have a problem with, that you go out with a woman, and at a certain point, when she's comfortable with you, or maybe not so much, she looks at you and says, "See me." And you say to her, "I see you." "No, you see my body. I need you to see me." And what she's saying basically is, don't simply focus on your senses. There is something about me that's beyond your senses, and I need you to be in touch with that. You know, and that's what Sufism is. And all esoteric traditions are like that, regardless of, you know, what religion they come from. So there is this little young chap who's walking to go to Beyonce's concert. And you know, she's going to go to be in Canada, I think, soon. Or San Jose. Maybe Oregon. Somewhere, anyways. And on his way to the concert, he hears this man shouting, and he becomes curious. He peeks in, and there is this man giving a sermon, and it's beautiful. It's like the Sermon of the Buddha, or the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus. And for a few minutes, he forgets all about Beyonce and why he left the house in the first place. He kind of gets glued by the door, you know? And he keeps listening and listening and listening and listening. And at a certain point, he looks at his watch, and it's like 2 a.m. And he's been standing by the door for the past like 10 hours. And when the sermon is over, he goes to this guy who's giving this riveting sermon, and he says, "What's the possibility of me actually being inside the lecture hall and listening to you?" He says, "It's very possible. but there are some prerequisites. Now, what you have in this is hope. That first you have the hope of getting to the concert. All of a sudden, something obstacles your path. You listen, you become intoxicated. The Beyonce hope goes away. That narrative is completely erased, and now it's replaced with a different kind of a hope. Okay? Beyonce is delicious to the ears. Beyonce may be delicious to the eyes. But all of a sudden you have a sermon that you hear it, but it touches a different part of you and you don't know what. Okay? So you are removed from your physical body to, let's just say, the intellectual, emotional, psychological, maybe even spiritual body, if you believe in those things. And now he goes forward and asks this man this question for one reason. He hopes that the answer that he gets is going to be a positive one. Yes, you can actually come and sit and listen. He also has another assumption, which is if I listen, or when I listen, I can understand. So there is faith in yourself, there is hope in yourself, and hope and faith in the other person. Okay, that you're earnest, that he can see the earnestness inside you, and he'll say, yes, come and sit. But this old man looks at this young kid and says, yeah, the condition is you need to clean the toilets for about 2 years. No, I don't want to clean the toilets. I want to listen to you talk. I understand that, but you need to clean the toilets. Now, for those of you who want to change something about your life, or there is this new inspired version of you. I want to change. There is this old version of you that is addicted to all sorts of things, doing the same thing on a routine, thinking the same way about things, feeling the same way about the things, reacting the same way about the things. These are your addictions, okay? But you also have this tiny little seed, I want to change. Well, and let's just say you like your past, and you think everything about your past is good. Well, you have a self that stands in the way. And one of the things that this old man understands is as long as this old Kendra or old Amir is there, it doesn't matter how intense your inspiration, you're always going to remain the same. Somehow this old self needs to be destroyed. You know, it's like asking, one of the tragedies of being me, unfortunately, is when I was about 18 and a half, I went into this Persian tiny little mini mart to get some ice cream. And I saw this man, and I fell in love with him. And I worked with him for about maybe 10, 12 years, and he became a family friend for the next 30 years. And I was a really, really devoted student, And then at a certain point, I became contaminated. I began to read a lot, I began to think a lot, I began to write a lot, and then I began to have my own ideas. And the tragedy for me right now is, even if Socrates, even if Jesus Christ, if those two people were walking into this room, it would be so difficult for me to become a student. I have difficulty learning from another. I have difficulty seeing someone above me. Myself, my ego, whatever you want to call it, is profoundly inflated. I am contaminated, And it's something that I've lost. See, when you're a student of some person, you don't need to go to a church and worship Yahweh or Jesus Christ. They're abstract way out there. When you have a teacher, his house is your temple. When you see him, he is the embodiment of wisdom. You don't need to go very far. And the moment you lose that, it means, and the moment you become something like me, you begin to revolve around yourself. And that's very tragic. And you don't trust anyone's ideas, you don't trust anyone's writing. Everything needs to come out of you. It has to be original. It has to be yours. Now, it may be something that Picasso had said, but you have to discover it for yourself. Okay.